welcome to the Lone Wolf Podcast. I'm Wolf, and joining me again today is my friend Drew Dog as we discuss Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. This will be part two of our discussion of the game. And if you missed part one, I revealed my Sephiroth theory, where I believe Sephiroth is actually there are two different versions of Sephiroth going on right now in the remake Rebirth world, according to my theory, and one of them is the one who caused all of this, who appears at the end of remake when they fight in the after going through the portal, and that's who I believe to be post Advent Children Sephiroth. So if you want to hear about that, head back over to episode one and go ahead and listen to that theory. But today in this episode, we're going to talk about the ending, but we're not going to do a thorough analysis of the ending like has been done so many times. We don't want to rehash that, but instead we're going to talk about a few key things that I've noticed in my two playthroughs of the game, and I've gone over it with Drew Dog here, and just like with my Sephiroth theory, I don't know if he's fully convinced yet, but I'll do my best to do that. What's up, Drew Dog?
What's up, man?
Doing all right tonight?
Yeah, man. Doing good.
Good.
Ready to talk some Final Fantasy.
Oh yeah. Well, I just want to say before we get started, there will be spoilers for Rebirth. There will be spoilers for probably the original Final Fantasy VII. So if you haven't played either game yet, then you might want to click off now and come back later. But we touched on this a little bit at the end of last episode. We believe that Aerith is alive, and what context she is alive, we'll get into here in a minute. But I just want to jump right into it because you see that thumbnail with spoiler is alive. Obviously, that's Aerith's name behind it, and we're going to get into that. And I don't want to keep people waiting. But first, we're going to start off with a couple of things before we get to that. And the first thing we're going to start off with is Zack and how he fits into the timelines and creating timelines, because he has a choice at the end of Rebirth that creates three different timelines, or two different timelines that are offshoots of the timeline that he's in, and it's obviously all very confusing. But let's get into that. All right, so we're going to start with Zack in the corkscrew tunnel on the main pillar interior, and he's trying to decide which way he wants to go. Obviously, to the center is to save Cloud, to the left is to save Biggs. But we see here in a second, when he does choose, white light, the rainbow light, comes out of the tunnel to the left, and he seems to create two offshoots of his timeline with, well, actually, there's three now that I think about it. When I think about the scenes at the end of the game, there's the one where he goes to the reactor and finds Biggs with the dud of a bomb, and then they face a Shinra troop. Then there's the one where he goes to the Shinra Corporation building to confront Hojo to try to save Cloud, so Cloud can save Aerith, because showing right now is when Marlene told him that Sephiroth is going to kill Aerith. So he ultimately does choose that one. And then there's the one where he is sitting outside the church before Sephiroth walks in at the end of the game, and before he throws him into the white light, like between world type of thing. And that one is the one where he's sitting there undecided. And they're all marked by different breeds of stamp. And that's how we know, obviously, if you play Rebirth, you know that the different timelines are distinguished. There's the white light, the white rainbow light coming out now. But the three timelines are all the different timelines are distinguished with different breeds of stamp. All right, so right here is the timeline where he chose to go straight. This is the choice he made to go find Professor Hojo to try to save Cloud. But in a minute, we'll get to the part where he is talking to Biggs. And this is what I wanted to touch on this, because I saw a lot of angry people, a lot of angry comments. It was like, why did they keep Biggs alive for Rebirth in that timeline if they were just going to kill him? But I don't think he's dead. I don't think Biggs is dead. Drew Dog, you want to weigh on this before I go any further?
Uh, which bigs? I mean, is there?
Right, exactly. Because you can see he's eating the bag of chips with a clearly different stamp on it, which means this is a different timeline. So this is the timeline if Zack had chose to go left to save Biggs from making the mistake. But obviously Biggs gets killed here. But in the timeline where he chose which way to go, I think Biggs is still alive. So I think this Biggs died, but I think there's another Biggs in the other timeline that's still alive. What do you think?
Yeah, I would agree with that. You know, I don't think that there is one bigs in all of the timelines. I mean, there's multiple. It just like you said. So it's like the fact that Zack exists in this timeline where Biggs dies. He exists in the timeline where he goes to save Cloud, and he exists in the timeline where he's undecided sitting out front of the church.
Right.
So you've got multiple Zacks there. Um, Now they may have all came from one original Zack, but once the timelines start branching, then you're having multiple copies of that, which we already know because if you look at all the other timelines, specifically the Cloud and Aerith scenes, I
Right.
mean, Cloud interacts with how many? Three, four different Aeriths just at the end of Rebirth, I mean, the date is one timeline. The where she hands him the white materia is a totally different timeline. So
Right.
he's reacting and or interacting with multiple versions of Aerith. So why can't there be multiple versions of Biggs? I agree.
I agree with that too. Because I mean, time continues from the branching timelines from that moment where Zack decides which way to go. The branching timelines from the moment Zack decides which way to go, timelines branch off, and he continues to exist in each of those timelines. Just like they've confirmed that there's multiple Aeriths in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth Ultimania, the book that's about the development of the game. They go into a lot more detail behind the scenes, and they confirm that there are multiple Aeriths, which is confirmed when she gives the white materia to Cloud and before pushing him through the portal, so Cloud can give it to the Aerith in his timeline, in the Rebirth timeline. And that leads me to believe that Biggs is alive still in at least two of the timelines because there's the one where he faces off. We just saw the squadron of soldiers at the Shinra building to try to confront Hojo. Then there's the scene where he's sitting out front of the church. So that's two different timelines where Biggs is, unless he went off and got himself killed and we didn't see it, he's alive.
Mhm.
So, I just wanted to touch on that because I saw a lot of angry comments and it dawned on me. It's like, well, wait a minute. That's just one timeline that he died in. Which, when he first got shot, when my first playthrough, I was like, really? They're going to do that to him? But then I thought about it and I'm like, no, no, no. There's still two other timelines. So, well, two other Zack timelines. This gets really, really confusing. And I don't know if they intended that on purpose to try to throw us off the scent of some of these theories that they knew we would develop. But yeah, so in two of the three Zack timelines, as far as we know, unless something happened off screen, Biggs is still alive. So that's two versions of Biggs, which also brings the question: two versions of Zack, because we don't know what happens. Well, actually, three versions because Zack jumps off the bridge, or yeah, off the bridge in the reactor, and we don't know exactly what happened to him. So
So you played the game a little bit more recent than I have, but at the end, again, this is spoilers, but at the end, the Zack that ends up coming through, meeting up with Cloud, helping to fight the final Sephiroth boss. Zack came from? I can't remember. So maybe you can remember. Is it the one where he went to rescue Cloud?
No, I don't think so.
Is
Is
that the Zack?
because I think it's the one where he's sitting out, the one where he couldn't decide. He's sitting out front of the church, out in front of the church, and he's like, "Do I save Biggs? Do I save Cloud?" He doesn't know what to do. You see Johnny walk by with the different, yet another different breed of stamp stuffed animal, and it signifies that he's in a completely separate timeline from the other two. And then that's when Sephiroth shows up and pushes him through the portal before walking into the church. And that's the Zack that's completely surrounded by white in all directions. And then he eventually, before Cloud faces off against Sephiroth, walks up. Cloud's standing there frozen. He taps him on the shoulder, and he somehow joins his timeline. So he's kind of like in flux between the timelines. And I think that's the Zack. The Zack that was sitting out in front of the church is the one who fights with Cloud.
Okay. This these different Zack timelines, specifically the event where he makes the choice between going to save Cloud is consciously creating, or not, maybe not consciously, but with that choice, he makes timelines. But what is interesting, or I guess maybe I want to ask you about, is who has the power to create the timelines? We know that Sephiroth does. And this goes back to your theory in the first episode of this, that the second Sephiroth, that post-Advent children Sephiroth, is the one creating timelines. So we know he has the power.
Right.
But who else does? Like Aerith doesn't have the power to create timelines. She is able to communicate, I do believe, with all the other Aeriths in the timelines, which is why no matter which timeline you're in, that Aerith seems to know more than what everybody else does.
Right.
So she can communicate, but she can't necessarily create the timelines. But here, in that scene with Zack, he makes a conscious choice to go after Cloud.
Right.
And by doing so, he creates different timelines. But it's not like every single person with every single choice that they make are making these timelines branch out. It seems like there are certain people who can. So what gives Zack the power to do that? And you can take it one step further. And in the scene where Cloud saves Aerith slash doesn't save Aerith,
Yeah.
it's almost as if Cloud creates a new timeline. He creates the timeline where she lives.
Right.
Because it shouldn't be that way. She should have died.
Right.
And one timeline she did, but because of his actions, he ended up creating one. So now it seems like Sephiroth has the power to create them. Zack has the power to create it, whether he even knows he can do that. And Cloud also has the power to create these new timelines, and whether he's consciously aware he can do that or not. But it doesn't seem like anybody else really has the power to make these timelines. I don't know, just something that's kind of
You know,
popped out at me.
right.
What makes it so Zack is able to create these timelines, but not everybody else? I understand with Sephiroth, he's all powerful and, damn near a god in a sense, but Zack is not that way. He's just a regular person. So
Right.
why does he now have the power to create those timelines?
You know, at the end of remake, they go into that portal to go fight Sephiroth and the arbiters of fate to defy fate. And Sephiroth is there in that portal. Cloud at the end of Rebirth, when he goes to try to save Aerith, is goes into a portal too, where Sephiroth also is. The post-Advent children Sephiroth, if my theory is correct, is there in both of those portals, but Cloud goes in alone. And we'll excuse me, we'll touch on all that here in a minute. But I just want to bring those two moments up because Sephiroth is there when new branching timelines are created. Because at the end of Remake, or actually at the end of Remake, going into Rebirth, they go in and defy fate, which creates a branching timeline where Zack is still alive. Because he comes back to Midgar with Cloud, and he sees on the TV Tifa, Barrett, Red 13, and Aerith all being loaded onto helicopters. So they obviously created a branching timeline while they were in that little pocket universe fighting the Arbiters of Fate, fighting Sephiroth, defying fate. Um, so I think that maybe it was Sephiroth all along in both of those portals that created the branching timelines. Now, why in Rebirth he would create a branching timeline where Aerith is still alive, I don't know. That would have to play out in the third game, but maybe he didn't intend for that to happen. But why even set up the portal in the first place? But I'm digressing a bit here. We can talk about that when we talk about that specific scene here in a minute. But as far as Zack goes, I don't think he knows. Obviously, he doesn't know he's creating new timelines, or he would be clued in on it. I'm not really sure how he has the ability to. Is it Sephiroth behind the scenes? Could it be Aerith behind the scenes? We touched on we came up with our own little Aerith theory too in part one with my Sephiroth theory that perhaps if he's from the original timeline post Advent Children, he's still in the live stream and alive and coming back, then maybe Aerith from the original game post Advent Children is also in the live stream and kind of controlling things, and we think she might actually be controlling the White Whispers from the live stream, the original Aerith from the original game. So maybe she's able to do it, but I don't think she is because if she was, then why? I don't know. We're starting to go off onto many different paths here, and it's confusing me, I know for sure. But I don't think Aerith can. I know Aerith is alive in all of these timelines because they've confirmed that there are multiple Aeriths alive, and it's debatable who joins Cloud at the end to fight, which Aerith joins Cloud at the end to fight Sephiroth. But Sephiroth is going to these different timelines to hunt her down, but she can communicate with herself through the timelines. I think that's why she's so clued in. But as far as Zack being able to create timelines, I don't know, man. I guess we'll just have to see in the third game why he has the ability specifically and nobody else does.
Maybe it is. Maybe it has to do with the original game. Hear me out. In the sense that if something happens that drastically changes the original game's storyline, then that can create a change, such as, when they end up going at the end of Remake, they should just leave Midgar, or just leave Midgar, right?
Right.
And head off.
Right.
But they didn't. They ended up going and fighting the Whispers, fighting Sephiroth. None of that should have happened. That's all. I think we would both agree that that's all Sephiroth's doing.
Right.
Him showing up, him saying, "Come on, fight these Whispers," blah, 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 blah. In doing that huge change to the original game storyline, boom, another timeline is created, probably multiple, but at least one that we know about, and that is where Zack is alive.
Right.
Okay. Now you take it a little bit further in Rebirth, there's Zack in the subways, and he has a choice to make: go get Biggs or go get Cloud. Well, Cloud is a lot more essential to the original game storyline than Biggs is. In fact, Biggs shouldn't even be there.
Right.
He should be dead. So, because he ends up making that change of going to get Cloud, making that choice, maybe that's what ends up creating the new timeline because it was so essential to the original game. I don't know. There's a lot of holes that can be poked into that because you could say, well, that's not really the Cloud from the original game.
Yeah. That's what I was
He
just
shouldn't have
thinking.
been there. Zack shouldn't have been there in the first place.
Right.
But because Zack is there, everything is thrown out of whack. Um, so
Yeah, I agree.
yeah, I don't
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm not sure. I don't even want to venture a guess because honestly, I can't figure it out. I came up with my Sephiroth theory, came up with the error theory on the fly in part one of this episode one of the podcast. But for this, I've got nothing. uh,
I definitely, to get back to the original like question or content
yeah,
for this video about Aerith. I think the since our last, you know, session of recording, um, I've been thinking about that Aerith theory that we kind of just came up with, and I have to say it sounds more and more plausible that the original game Aerith returned to the live stream as she did in the story, in the original game story, but it is she who is A, controlling the White Whispers, and B, able to communicate with all the other Aeriths in the remake slash rebirth series, which again, like you said, is why Aerith always seems to be a little bit more knowledgeable than every other character, just because the original game, Aerith, is there kind of helping to guide the path, to lead all these other Aeriths. Oh, wait a minute, you need to do this. This needs to happen. The white material has to get to Cloud. And so, oh, if this Aerith in this timeline can't do that, then we need to make sure that Aerith in this alternate timeline does get to make sure it happens.
right.
So I think that theory, I think there's lots of evidence to support that. And I think that's very valid.
Well, that and at the beginning of the original game, at the beginning of remake, she's knelt down in the alley talking to the live stream. So I think that's how she's clued in. That she talks to the live stream, which in the original game she was kind of clued into the planet and stuff, but with the remake rebirth timeline, which I believe is a branching timeline created by that post Advent children Sephiroth. If you're confused by all of that and this error theory that we're talking about, it's in episode one, part one of our Final Fantasy VII Rebirth discussion. I'll put a link in the description if you want to go check that out so you can get caught up on that. But I think you're right. I think the original Aerith is in the live stream because if post Advent Children Sephiroth can come back and he's in the live stream because we see this scene with Tifa in the weapon and he's there fighting. His Black Whispers are fighting the planet's White Whispers, which you and I believe are controlled by Aerith. Then I think she's in the live stream, and I think that's how she's communicating with all the different Aeriths and all the different timelines. So
Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
it's
go.
the white versus black in the sense of materia. It's good versus evil. It's
Yep.
Aerith versus Sephiroth, all those things. I mean, as Sephiroth at the end of the original game returns to the live stream, but yet is able to hold his form or his spirit to the point where he can manifest himself in Advent children, then who's to say that Aerith, knowing, wait a minute, my fight isn't done yet, Sephiroth is not fully destroyed, you know, this is
Mhm.
my mission to combat him, to oppose him. Who's to say that she's not able to retain some sort of her spirit? She doesn't necessarily need to come back, but there is an essence of her that is still around. Um,
Well, in
but
Advent Children, sorry to interrupt, but in Advent Children, she is still around. Her and Zack, they affect that story, especially Aerith. So, sorry, go ahead.
that's true. It's been a while since I've seen Evan
Yeah,
Children.
I have to watch it again, man.
I did watch it not too long ago, but it was pretty late at night. I might have been half asleep. But all right, here's another question. So we both agree that the Aeriths in the timeline, or in all these timelines, the remake slash rebirth, is communicating with the original game Aerith that is
Mhm.
exists in the live stream. Do you think that all of these Aeriths in the different timelines, do they know who they are specifically talking to, or do you think they just think that she's communicating with the live stream?
That's an excellent question. I'm not sure, because I know they know they're all communicating with each other in different timelines, but that is a very interesting question because they could just think it's the live stream, it's the planet communicating with them, but in reality,
I,
it could be her.
yeah, I think it definitely is her, the original Aerith,
Hmm.
um, that is kind of imposing her will, shaping the timeline, speaking through it. She's definitely pulling strings behind the scenes and all that stuff. But um, no, the more I think about it here in just the past minute, um, I think that these timeline eras just see it as communicating with the planet, communicating with the timeline. They don't really
Hmm.
realize, oh, this version of myself that was the original game version is actually the one that's behind everything. Um, yeah, I don't think it's that.
Right.
No,
And
I've talked myself out of
yeah.
it.
If all of this is confusing you, if you haven't listened to episode one, we believe that post Advent Children Sephiroth has come back and created a branching timeline that is the remake rebirth timeline. So hypothetically, if Sephiroth from the original game can come back, then so can Aerith, in a sense, because she's still in the live stream, which kind of seems to be connected to all of these different worlds, all of these different timelines. In a way, I think it's kind of how Sephiroth. Well, no, I was gonna say it's kind of how Sephiroth can travel back and forth between these timelines, but maybe it's that little pocket universe where he creates the portals, where he's at the edge of creation, where he fights Cloud at the end of Remake, where he fights Cloud and Zack at the end of Rebirth. So there's just so many questions that we're gonna have to wait 4 years for the third part of the series to come out to answer. But I mean, it's fun to sit here and guess as to what's going on.
Somebody over at Square Enix is watching all these videos and all these theories and stuff, and is just getting a grand old chuckle out of it.
Oh, I'm sure they
Um,
are.
just shaking their heads.
Right.
But then somebody's going to hit upon something that, is actually true, and they'll be like, dang it, man. Oh,
Yeah.
they'll get mad.
We're gonna have to go
Yeah, I'm
change it
sure.
now. We got to go change it
Yeah,
to
I'm
throw
sure
them
all
off.
these
Yeah.
videos are making lots of people laugh.
Keep on guessing. All right.
That's
Well,
all right. Keep on guessing.
that's right. We're let's transition over to the end of Rebirth and talk about Aerith still being alive and that pocket universe that Cloud goes into, the portal. So let's transition over to that. All right, so now we're going to transition over to why I think Aerith is still alive. The Aerith from the Rebirth remake timeline, um, which is possibly the original timeline, but I don't think it is because, well, I got into that in episode one with my Sephiroth theory. But here we have Cloud going through the portal, and he's the only one who goes through the portal, so he's the only one who can see the changes. I think when he goes through this portal, he enters the little pocket universe, edge of creation, whatever you want to call it. It's not really the edge of creation because he's still in the ancient capital, but he just goes through the portal into a little pocket universe, is what I like to call them. But he deflects Sephiroth's sword. He saves Aerith inside the pocket universe. Outside of this universe, things play out as normal and she dies. But I think in this moment where he deflects the sword, just like we were just talking about with Zack and Sephiroth and creating different branching timelines, I think he creates a branching timeline where Aerith is still alive. And for some reason, and I just thought of this today. Excuse me, my allergies are bothering me a little bit. Sorry, I keep clearing my throat. But I just thought of this today as I was putting these videos together for this recording, and for whatever reason, this branching timeline overlays the remake Rebirth timeline because with Zack, he made his decisions. It was three separate timelines with three separate Zacks. For whatever reason here, and see, I think it might have something to do with both the black and white whispers that we're seeing Cloud fight through to get to Aerith. For whatever reason, I think this branching timeline is overlays the remake Rebirth timeline, which is why he can see the tear in the sky and the others can't, which is why he can see Aerith at the end of the game and others can't. And I got a couple of other things too that I want to point out that we'll get to in a minute. But it's really interesting to me how, with all the other branching timelines, they go off with the characters and they are their own separate thing. But with this, it's kind of like the two timelines are happening on top of each other at the same time, and Cloud has one foot in the world where Aerith died and one foot in this branching timeline he creates right here where she lives. What do you think about that, Drew Dog?
Yeah, I agree. Somehow, and it may be the reason why he's able to create this timeline is because he's at the edge of creation. And maybe that's the key. It wouldn't explain why Zack is able to create different timelines, but it would make sense because this is kind of where Sephiroth has been hanging out.
Mm-hmm.
He's been hanging out at this pocket dimension, this edge of creation, and from there he's making all these different timelines. He's traveling through different timelines, and now that Cloud is here, he's able to make this separate timeline where Aerith lives. And just like Sephiroth has a footprint in all the timelines, and he can kind of jump in and out of, anybody who has Genova cells, no matter what the timeline is. Now, Cloud also has that same kind of power. Not that he can jump in, it's because he was a part of the creation here at this, or here in this pocket dimension. So in a sense, he almost kind of has the same power as Sephiroth does as it relates to the timelines. He can see multiple timelines at the same time. And maybe that's it. Maybe you have to be a part of when the timelines split to be able to see or access the timelines. And since Sephiroth is the one who's creating all of them, he's able to see and interact with all the different timelines.
Right.
Here, Cloud is only able, or is only a part of Aerith lives, Aerith dies.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the only two that he's able to interact or to see. So he has just a small little portion of whatever power Sephiroth has. Is that
Right.
kind of does that make sense? Is that kind of what you're thinking?
That does make sense. It's not exactly what I was thinking, but it does make a lot of sense when you lay it out like that. I think another reason though why he could possibly be able to see multiple timelines is because Aerith took him into, and I just thought of something else. And Aerith took him to the other timeline where they had their date, and she calls it a dream, and she says, "My dream." Think of this as a dream, my dream, where they have their date, which is obviously a different timeline. So maybe that gave him the ability to see different timelines. But I just thought about this when she pushes him through that white portal and he's falling through, and kind of like how Zack did, except when he does it, when Cloud does it, Sephiroth joins him. Sephiroth shows him all the different worlds he's creating. I think maybe Sephiroth clued him in on it and gave him the ability maybe to see things as a whole, because at the end of Remake, he extends his hand to Cloud at the edge of creation and says, "Let's defy fate together." And because he wants Cloud's help. But maybe he gave Cloud the ability to see the different timelines, to create different timelines as they were falling through, and he's explaining his master plan. What do you think about that?
Hmm.
Because he,
That's
at the end of Remake, he wanted Cloud to be part of his plan. He wanted Cloud's help. So maybe he's trying to clue Cloud in. Try saying that 5 times fast. Maybe he clued Cloud in so he could possibly sway him into joining him in defying fate together. I'm just spitballing here, so if you don't,
hmm.
if you think I sound crazy, let me know.
No. Um, it's something I have to think about. It kind of reminds me a little bit about Neo in the Matrix. Like he always knew something was wrong, and then when he meets with Trinity and she kind of opens his eyes a little bit
Right.
and kind of tells him, just gives him a little bit of information. From then on, he's able to see. It's kind of like that when Sephiroth opened Cloud's eyes a little bit, revealed his plans and the different timelines. Now all of a sudden, Cloud is able to see it, whereas he couldn't before. So um, interesting. I'll have to ponder it.
Right. Yeah, me too.
I'll have to ponder it.
I like coming up with ideas off the top of my head like that, but then you gotta sit back and kind of think about it. But maybe Aerith kind of clued him in too when she took him to the other timeline. But I, for whatever reason,
Let me ask you a question, man.
okay.
Okay. Right now, so on the screen right now, here's where Cloud is facing down Sephiroth. It's a mono e mono match. And then Aerith shows up to fight alongside him. Where did Aerith come from?
That is something I've been thinking about since I played this game the first time. I think either it's an Aerith from a different timeline, or it's the Aerith he saved inside that pocket universe when he deflected Sephiroth's sword. I can't decide which though, because they, and I just assumed before Ultimania came out, before they released that
Okay.
book, before they
I
released
think
it.
those are so I agree. I think the Aerith that he saved
Mhm,
is probably the most logical choice
I think so.
of where she came from. But here's another question. Where they're at, this pocket dimension, the edge of creation,
Mhm.
um, do you think the life stream exists in that pocket dimension?
Hmm.
or are they
Well,
outside of it?
you can kind of see it there while she's holding his hand and they're standing back to back, reminiscent of Advent Children. You can see the green, and if you look closely, you can kind of see the waves of before it zooms out. You can kind of see the green waves of the live stream. I'm not
Okay.
entirely sure though because all of these branching timelines are offshoots of the one world. So they got to all be connected by something, and I think that one thing is either the edge of creation or it's the live stream because Sephiroth is in both, and he's able to travel
Well,
between them somehow through either the edge of creation, the pocket universes, or the live stream.
well, if the live stream does exist in game Aerith is now existing within the live stream,
Mhm.
do you think it could be the original game Aerith kind of manifesting to help Cloud in that final fight? Or is it more of a remake timeline Aerith? Does that make sense?
I think it's remake Rebirth, and I before Ultimania came out, I just assumed it was the Aerith that he saved from the Pocket universe, and but after they confirmed that there are multiple Aeriths across multiple worlds, I thought maybe one of them came over to help him fight. But like you, I think it's probably this Aerith here because it's there every time he's near her alive, they're surrounded by the white whispers, they're surrounded by the white light, by the rainbow light. I think it was probably her.
Well, would make sense. Because if it was an Aerith from a different timeline, how would she get there? She's not able to travel in
That's true.
between timelines.
That's very true.
But this Aerith, this Aerith that survived is already in this pocket dimension.
Right.
So, yes, one version of her dies, one version of her lives, but the version that lives, technically, she already is here.
Right. That's true.
So that would make a lot more sense.
It would. Um.
I want to go on record and just say that the ancient temple level of Rebirth was awesome.
Oh, it really was. Yeah.
That might be my favorite like setting slash level. It was so awesome.
Yes.
The fights were awesome. The music, oh my God, the
Oh,
music was the best in there. That
some of the
was
best
just,
in the
I
game.
had
Yep.
a blast with that level.
Absolutely. I did too. All right. So next, and this is the last thing I wanted to touch on, is why I think Aerith is alive. And a lot of people think that what happens after they fight Sephiroth and defeat him when he tells Aerith to wake up, like we just saw, a lot of people think that it's just Cloud's broken mind, his broken psyche, because we know that obviously Hojo messed with him and Zack uh, after the events of Nibelheim 5 years prior to this, and everybody thinks that he just can't cope with her dying. He's refusing to accept it. He's manifesting Aerith in his broken mind to kind of compensate for instead of having to deal with tragedy and loss. But I don't think that's the case. I think Aerith is alive. I think, like we've already established, he created a branching timeline. He's got one foot in both, and they kind of overlap each other because obviously she's still here. And you'll see in a second why I think that it's not just Cloud who can see her and that she is actually present there because right here, she walks up to Red 13. She puts her hand on his back. He feels it. You can see him react to it. He feels it. He raises his head and he even says, Aerith? if she was just a figment of Cloud's imagination and only Cloud could see her and she wasn't really there, Red wouldn't have reacted to her touching him. He wouldn't have felt her presence there. He wouldn't have asked Aerith. So that's part one as to why I think she's still alive. And there's another thing I wanted to show you. Do you have anything on that real quick before I go to the last thing?
No, I totally agree with you.
All right, so let's switch over to the credits where the credits are rolling. So here we have the credits rolling, and if you notice to the left side of the credits, it shows scenes from the game, scenes from your playthrough of the game. Now, as you can see, well, we'll get there in a second, but these are the ending events of the game on the left, and it shows you what we saw. Now, with Cloud being an unreliable narrator, there he is picking up Aerith's body to tell her to wake up, and that's where I'm going to pause it here in a second because all of those events where he tells her to wake up, where she wakes up, where she touches his cheek, where they're sitting by the water, all of that is absent right here, which is why a bunch of people think, and I've seen this in many videos, people are theorizing we don't see it here because it didn't actually happen and they're only showing us scenes that actually happened. That's why it's all just in Cloud's mind. It's all just his broken psyche, and he can't accept the fact that Aerith is dead, so he's manifesting her in his own mind. But what I just showed you in the ending cutscene where she touches Red 13's back, and he noticeably reacts to it and even asks if she's there, and he knows it's her. Obviously, somebody's just touching his back. If she wasn't really there, how does he know it's her specifically, right? How does he even know to ask Aerith? Because it could have been anybody. There's a lot of other people around. It could have been like a stranger or a monster coming up to attack. So he knows specifically that it is Aerith. So what I wanted to show you here on these in the post credits, and I'm going to back it up just a little bit here. Right here, we see at the end of the game, right there, hopefully you can see my mouse cursor, right here, we see Aerith. Aerith is actually there. That actually happened. Now you can say it's because Cloud's there too, and that's why we're able to see her, but Sephiroth sees her too, and he even says, I underestimated you. So she's actually there in this scene, and it's there in the credits. So even though some of the scenes that are missing because it may be part of Cloud's broken mind, these scenes are there. She's there. She's there to fight Sephiroth. She's there holding his hand to send him back. Now, there's one last thing I wanted to show you at the very end of the credits. Right here it is. Why is she there then? Cloud has already flown off in the tiny Bronco. Cloud is no longer there. She says goodbye, or they say goodbye. He gets on the tiny Bronco. It flies off into the sky. In fact, in this scene where I pause it, you can't even see it. Aerith is still there. If she's only part of Cloud's broken mind, if she's only there because only he sees her, why is she still here by herself? That's why I think he created a branching timeline. That's why I think they're overlapping. That's why I think she's alive. Maybe not on the same plane of existence as the rest of the party, and half of even Cloud because he's got one foot in both timelines. But if all of those other, and you can see right above this, all of the other scenes have been blacked out. And people theorize that's because it's part of Cloud's mind, broken mind, and only he sees it. But she's here at the end in that ending cutscene, and that's the only scene they show from it. They don't show him watching her walk around the tiny Bronco to the different characters, touching Red's back or anything like that, but they do show her standing here by herself, which means she's not just part of Cloud's mind because she's actually there. Otherwise, they wouldn't show it, just like, and why they excluded those other scenes, no idea. I have no idea why they would do that, but that's just what I caught during my second playthrough because I had already seen those other videos, the ending explained videos, the theories as to why those scenes are missing in the credits, but this one stuck out to me because she's there. Obviously, if they included this in the in the credits with all the other scenes that actually took place during your playthrough.
I totally agree. Um, I think she's there in the other timeline. The other people can't see it. They weren't at the edge of creation when the timelines branched. So they're not, so they don't have the 2 feet or both feet in both worlds.
Mm-hmm.
Only Cloud does. He's the only one who can see it. She's actually alive in that timeline. Now, the other party member's timeline, she's dead.
Mm-hmm.
But in this one, in the alternate one, she is alive.
Right.
And you know what she's going to do in number 3? She's going after Zack. She's going to get
Yeah.
Zack. And she's going to bring him back. And they're
uh,
going to have a fight with Zack and Aerith and Cloud all there together.
that's what
That's
I
my
think.
prediction. That's
I
my prediction.
I 100% agree because they brought back Zack. They brought back Zack. They brought Zack back for this one. Why wouldn't they bring him back at the end of the third
Yeah.
one with Aerith?
Yeah, I think they're doing a little bit of fan service here, you know.
Right.
I mean, in the
Plus,
original game, that there was no more heartbreaking scene
oh, I know.
than than the death of Aerith. And how many, for years, decades, people, oh no, there's a way that you can bring her back, and oh, with this code, and it was all just BS.
Yeah.
None of it was true. But every fan wanted to be able to bring Aerith back. And so, like I
Mm-hmm.
said, a little bit of fan service. We're gonna have her so she can come back at the end, you know. And who doesn't want to play as Zack? I mean, the
Right.
Zack scene, where you actually played as him in Rebirth, they were great. They were awesome.
Yeah, they were.
It was great to get his attitude and his personality and to see what he was. And so yeah,
Yeah, because
totally agree.
even though Cloud reminds Aerith of Zack, they're two completely different people. They have two
Now what's
completely
going on
different
now? What's
personalities.
gonna happen with that romance triangle?
Uh
I
huh.
don't know.
I know what you're getting at because you're a fan of Tifa and Cloud, and I'm a fan of Aerith and Cloud. So I don't know. We'll see. I think. All right. So here's two things I want to mention. People are gonna say they're not gonna bring Aerith and Zack back to stay alive at the end of the third game. They'll just join the fight and leave. I think they could include them in the ending and have them alive in the main world where they're at. And here's why before you get all angry at me in the comments. Here's why. If my theory about Sephiroth is correct and he is post Advent Children Sephiroth come back to create a branching timeline, if the remake Rebirth is a branching timeline from the original game, and here's why I want to specify and clarify this because a lot of people are saying that Square Enix, and they have said this, they're going to keep Advent Children canon. So everybody took that to mean that this remake trilogy is going to lead into Advent Children. But I don't think that's necessarily true, and here's why. If my theory is correct about Sephiroth coming back post Advent Children, then the original timeline is intact. It's already been played out, it's already happened. He came back and created the remake Rebirth timeline, which is a branching timeline, which does not have to lead into Advent Children because it's its own separate thing. As we've seen how things have played out differently in all these other different timelines, with Zack, with Cloud and Aerith at their date, they've all accepted their fate at the end of the world, and they've all played out differently. That's why I think if this is a branching timeline, the remake, Rebirth, and the third part of the trilogy, then that means the original game from '97 intact. Everything's intact. Happened exactly as it was supposed to, but it's already played out. Advent Children is still canon. It has already played out as it was supposed to. That's how they keep it canon, by making the remake rebirth timeline a branching timeline, which I touched on this in part one in episode one. If it wasn't a branching timeline and it was the original timeline, why do the Whispers need to keep showing up to put things back on track in remake? If it was the original timeline, then it would play out exactly as it was, and the Whispers wouldn't need to show up to keep putting things back on track. But Sephiroth needs things to play out exactly as they did in the original game. Post Advent Children Sephiroth Returned needs things to play out exactly as they did in the original. So he's trying to keep things on track with the Whispers. Or, well, I think it started out in remake as the Whispers trying to keep things on track, but now Sephiroth somehow controls the Black Whispers, which I'm sure we'll find out in the last game. Excuse me. How he's able to do that. But that's how I think Advent Children stays canon. Now, as far as Zack and Aerith meeting up in a timeline, after Zack goes back after the fight with Sephiroth, he ends up in a church. And he's sitting there questioning, did all that really just happen? And he's like, no, it had to have happened. So what timeline is he in? We're not shown what timeline he's in because he jumps back because he ends up fighting Sephiroth in a church where the end of the world is happening because we see Meteor. And then Sephiroth shows up. So he's obviously put back into a timeline that isn't that same timeline where he fought Sephiroth. So is he in a timeline where Aerith's alive? Is he back in the timeline where she's just an empty husk in a coma? Or has he been put into a timeline where she's alive and awake and they reunite and they somehow together, just like he did in this game, make their way into this Rebirth remake timeline to help fight Sephiroth at the end?
The last one.
I think so. I mean, that's what I think.
Totally.
It's up for debate, and I guess we won't find out until the third game comes out. But that's what I think. That's my theory. I think that they can bring those two back into the main timeline and keep them alive because this is technically a branching timeline, which is why things are different and why things play out differently. Why the Whispers fought so hard to keep things back on track because they kept trying to go off course, like all these other branching timelines, like where Zack's alive and where Aerith takes Cloud to go for a date to give him the white materia. They all play out differently. So this is a branching timeline that the Whispers are trying to keep on track because it starts to go off track. It starts to play out differently. I mentioned in episode one where Jesse replaces Cloud. Cloud in the original game he was on board to go to the Sector 5 reactor to blow it up. In remake, they cut Cloud loose after they blow up the first reactor, and Jesse's supposed to go, but then the Whispers show up to injure her, so Cloud has to go, so the original story stays on track. If it was the original, things would happen take by take, play by play, just like they did in the original game, but they don't. That's why I think it's a branching timeline. But that's my theory, and I'm sticking to
it. Until the third game. So you got sticking with it for the next 4 years.
Exactly.
No, right. I totally get it. I totally understand it. I think it makes sense. I mean, if you had to chart it out, it's the original game, Advent Children, remake, rebirth, and then at the third game. And that will essentially, at the end of the third game, Advent Children will not happen as it did in the first time around.
Honestly, I don't
maybe there's still geostigma or whatever, but yeah.
Honestly,
they're finally going to get rid of Sephiroth and he will be no more.
I don't even think it happens. I think it happens as far as keeping it canon. It happens at the end of the original timeline, but I think they create a new future in this branching timeline. I don't even think it happens. I don't even think Rebirth or the third game in the trilogy is even going to lead into Advent Children. I could be completely
No.
wrong. I could be completely wrong, but I don't know. There's a lot of evidence if you watch episode one and then this episode that we presented that point to that being the case.
Yeah, I agree with that. I would totally agree with that. And we're obviously right.
Yeah, of course.
You know,
No room for
nah,
alternate
nah.
theories here. No.
You know, you
we're
want to talk about canon?
yeah.
What we're saying is canon.
We're obviously kidding, of course, before you get enraged at us, but no, but I don't know. The more we talk about it, the more I believe uh that's what's playing out here. That's what's happening. But obviously, up for debate. We won't know for another 4 very long years. All right, so that's my theory. Yeah, that's my ending theory as far as Aerith being alive and what I think is going to happen at the end of part three. What I think, how I think Advent Children is going to stay canon, but remake Rebirth trilogy plays out completely different because I do believe it is a branching timeline created by post Advent Children Sephiroth, who has come back through the live stream somehow. I guess we'll see how that happened in the third game. If I'm right, I could be completely wrong here. I'm open to suggestion. If you got a better theory, let's hear it in the comments. What do you think, though? How do you think Zack's able to create multiple timelines? Do you think that Cloud, I said Zack, right? How do you think Zack is able to create multiple timelines with his decision? Do you think Cloud saved Aerith in a branching timeline that now overlaps the original? Let us know below. Do you think it's post Advent Children Sephiroth come back? Do you think this is a branching timeline? There's a lot to discuss. Drew Dog, did you want to add anything else before we end this one?
No, I think you just kind of said it all. I think I agree with pretty much everything. I will say that remake was awesome. I had a great time with it. Rebirth was even better, story wise.
Absolutely.
You know, just a great game, and I can't wait for the third one to come out because it's going to be awesome.
Oh yeah, 4 long years. But that's going to do it for us. If you're still here, thanks for watching, and let us know what you think below. See you next time.